Hello, and welcome to 5-Minute Math. Today we are looking at the 5th grade concept of graphing on the coordinate plane. This is 5.8c, the advanced version. If you are interested in exploring the 5.8c readiness practice for the intermediate or proficient versions, or the readiness practice resource along with any other standard, you can find those by using the link in the video description. All right, so Robert is creating a pattern by taking half of each x-coordinate to get the y-coordinate. And so we need to plot 6 points on the coordinate grid. All right, so let's make a table first. And we're just going to put x and y. And we notice we take half of each x. So here's my rule. Half of x equals y. And I can multiply by 1/2 or I can divide it by 2. That's both going to be the same thing, right? So if I were to do my 1, right, what's half of 1? Well, half of 1 is just half. But if I were to take 2, cut that in half, I'm going to get 1. So you notice that my x's are going to go up by 3's, or my x's are going to go up by 1's, but then my y's are going to go up by halves. So 1.5. 4 is going to be 2. 5, you notice I'm going to take half of that and get 2.5. And then 6. Now, you might have plotted 6 different points, and that's fine. So let's go ahead and plot these points, and then let's label them. So my x's are going to be pretty easy. I'm going to go right on the integers right there. The y's, I am going to have to utilize some of the halves. So 1, it's going to be right there. So that's going to be 1. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit to make it a little bit easier for me to write this. So let's make this 1, and then my y value is 1/2. So now I need 2, 1. That's super easy. So 2, 1. Now 3, 1.5. So I have to make sure that my y value is right in between the 1 and the 2 on the y-axis. So that's going to be 3, 1.5. And we're noticing the pattern that the y value is always going to be the y value is always going to be half of the x value. So let's fix that. You've probably been looking at that wondering what is going on with that. There we go. Half of the x equals y. So let's look at 4. That's pretty easy. That's on the intersection of 4 and 2. 5 is going to be at 5 and then 2.5. And then we end up with 6 and 3. All right, so if we zoom back out, we'll see this pattern emerging here. And you notice it just goes in that straight line. And we could have included 0, 0 if we wanted to, because half of 0 is still 0. So that's always an easy way to start, is start at the origin, if you can, at 0, 0. All right, so 3 sisters are buying toys at Walmart, and each sister has a coupon for $1.50 off the total cost as long as each of them buys $7.50 worth of toys. All right, so we need to have an x-axis that is before the coupon. All right, so let's label that before the coupon. And it's the cost before the coupon, so let's put a dollar sign. And then the y-axis is after the coupon. So this is the cost after the coupon. Now, we have this simple rule to where it's $1.50 off. So if we take our x, what we're going to do is we are going to subtract 150. So I'm going to call that a 1.5 because we don't really need that extra 0 unless we're dealing with dollars and cents. That's going to get me my y. Now, the only rule is we each of the purchases have to be at least $7.50. All right, um, so let's go $7.50. What is that going to be? Well, $7.50 minus $1.50, right, is going to be $6. Now I can buy more than that. I just can't buy less than that. So we can go up to 20, right? So let's just kind of spread them out. Let's do $12.50. I'm going to take away $1.50 from that, and that is going to be 11. And then let's say I get the full 20. I buy $20 worth of toys. I still only get $1.50 off. So that's going to be 18.5. So those are 3 points. You might have chosen many different points to make it work. All right, so let's start with this first point. So my x value is 7.5, so it's going to be right there between the 7 and the 8. My y value is going to be 6, so we can just place that right there. And I will go ahead and label that 7.56. Now 12.5 is going to be right there between my 12 and 13, but that goes all the way up to 11. So let's put that right there, and we'll label it as well, 12.5, 11. And then finally, if I go all the way over to 20, my y value is still $1.50 off, so it's 18.5. So in this case, I've got to go between the 18 and the 19. So 20 and then 18.5. All right, so you notice we've got a straight line going between those 3 points, but it's not going to go through the origin because that $1.50 off kind of shifts everything. All right, now we've got a table here, and it's kind of filled out. We need to fill out the rest of the table, and then we're going to graph it. All right, so we've got two of these that we can use to kind of figure out what is our rule. So it's these two. So 2, and I'm going to assume they're multiplication because typically when they get really large like that, they're going to multiply rather than add. So 2 times what makes $1.50? That's what we're thinking. And then that same thing should be 5 times that same thing should equal 375. Well, I know that the inverse operation multiplication is division. So if I want to undo 2 multiplied by something, I can take my 1.5 divided by 2. So 2 goes into 15. I'm going to bring my decimal up. That is going to be 7 times. That's 14. I can always add zeros afterwards since it's a decimal. And that's going to be 75. All right, so I think my rule is x, right? It's going to be x times, I'll put 0.75, and that's a multiplication because I use the parentheses there. Or you could write 0.75x. Sometimes you'll see it like this. The order usually has the number before the variable, but either one is technically correct. Either one of those are going to end up equaling our y. So those two are both equivalent. So let's verify. Let's make sure that 5 times 0.75, so I'm just going to write it as 0.75 times 5. That's going to equal the 375. So that's 5, that's 25, and that's 35, 37, 2 digits behind the decimal. Okay, so that is going to be my scale factor, is the 0.75. So what I need to do is I need to think, well, what times 0.75 gets me 225? I don't really want to divide 225 by 0.75 if I have to, but let's just look. It's between 2 and 5. So since it looks like we're dealing with whole numbers, it's literally going to be 3 or 4. I'm going to take my 150 and I'm just going to add 75. If that doesn't work, I'll add another 0.75 and it's going to either be 3 or 4. And that's going to be 5, 2, and there we go, 225. So I added a 0.75 to the 150 because the 150 is my multiply by 2. That means this is going to multiply by 3. And then by 6, I could multiply 6 times 0.75, or why not just add 0.75 to the 5? We're just adding another 0.75, so let's not work harder if we don't need to. So that's going to be a 10, it's a 15, 450. All right, so 450. So I have my points here. I'm going to go ahead and this is my x value, this is my y value. So let's label them. So total packages is going to be my x, and then I'll put right here total charge is my y. Now, let's get some coordinates down. So I need 2, and instead of the 150, I'm going to put 1.5, 3, 2.25. I need 5, 3.75, and then I need 6 with 450, or 4.5. Now, I have a lot of decimals, including that 3.75, so I'm going to make a choice on the scale factor, because no one says what it has to be. Typically, we would count by ones. But what I want to do is I want to count every other by 1. So really what I'm doing is I am creating a scale factor of 0.5. Every line is going to be a half, and that's going to give me a little bit of wiggle room on some of these decimals. Because if not, there would be a lot of guessing, and it would be kind of inaccurate. So I'm going to kind of zoom in. If this were a graph on the computer, you would zoom in a little bit, and it would spread out. So let's look at my first number, 2 and then 1.5. So here's my 2, but look, my 1.5 actually lands on a line because I gave myself room for it. There's my 1.5. So we can just label this 2 and then 1 5/10. 3 and 2.25. So here's my 3. Now 2.25 doesn't land anywhere, but if I'm going by 25s, right, the 2.25 is going to be in between the 2 and the 2.5. Think of it like $2, $2.25, $2.50. The $2.25 is going to land right in between the $2 and the $2.50. We can think of it like quarters. So 3, 2.25. Same with this 5 and 3.75. So my 5 is over here, but my 3.75, I'll label my 3.50 right here. So the 3.75 is going to be halfway between the 3.50 and the 4. So there's my 5, and there's my 3.75. And then finally my 6 and 4.5. That's going to be a little bit easier because I go to 6. Then my 4.5 actually has a line right here. We can just go ahead and label it. It's got its own line. So we're good there. So 6, 4.5. All right, so we have filled out the table and we have filled out the graph. If you're interested in exploring the 5-point AC Readiness Practice resource aligned with the intermediate or proficient versions, or the Readiness Practice resource aligned with any other standard, you can find those by using the link in the video description.